Speaking of the Occupy movement, there is a movement to occupy people's homes so that they can rescue them from foreclosure. A guy who knows all about that is Congressman Dennis Cardoza. He's a Democrat from the 18th District of California, and in his district, 30% of the houses have been foreclosed and 70% are underwater, which are stunning facts. Congressman Cardoza, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Congressman, I know you're upset not just by what the situation we have in your district, but also by the response of the government. Right. Do you think the Obama administration has done enough here?
I think it's been woefully inadequate. The president promised a joint session of Congress and the country that a new program was going to come forward to deal with the foreclosure crisis. And when we actually talked to his guy, actually it's his elevated bureaucrat, because his appointee, much like the other issue that you talked about earlier in the show, has not been confirmed by the Senate, was rejected, so you have a temporary employee in charge of the foreclosure crisis in America, a guy named Edward DeMarco, who's never met anyone who's been foreclosed on. Basically, it was warmed over other programs. There was no new program that he promised Congress or the American people. He's done nothing, and we have the foreclosures just keep rolling along.
So, yeah, I mean, you've made some strong words here. Let me give you a quote of yourself, actually. You said, "I'm sorry, but you're president of the damn United States of America," referring to President Obama. "You have to do what is right for the country and not worry about the political ramifications." So, obviously, a very strong statement. So what would you have done differently?
Well, I have a bill that would refinance people. We give the banks money on an overnight rate of 1/8 of 1%. They loan it back to Americans, or they've got us locked in at these high mortgage rates at 7 3/4, 6. I would have said, let's refinance everybody. Moody's and other institutions have said that it's the equivalent if we allow everybody in America to refinance and lower their mortgage rate. I don't believe in throwing in the keys or cramming down and only paying the bank a certain percentage. I think everybody's got to pay their debts. But you could refinance at a lower rate, extend it over 40 years, try and keep as many American families in their homes as possible. And I have a bill called the Home Act that would do just that. Moody's said that it was the equivalent of an $85 billion tax cut. Tremendous stimulus to the economy at no cost virtually to the federal government, because we're already lending the banks the same amount of money or the same price at much less.
Right. So and I want people to understand something, because when Donald Trump goes bankrupt 4 different times, since he's rich, he doesn't call it bankrupt, he calls it debt restructuring. But this would be debt restructuring, literally in this case. And a guy in Minneapolis whose house was being occupied because he invited them in, his house, he was so underwater it was worth he owed $230,000 on it. And then when Bank of America just foreclosed on it, they didn't refinance, they didn't do anything, and they resold it at $83,000. They lost so much money, so nobody won. Even the banks didn't win there. So refinancing is so that people can actually pay their bills makes a ton of sense. So when you bring that to the Obama administration, what do they say?
I had that bill on their desk before he took the oath of office in January. I sat down with Jason Furman during the transition period, before Obama was even officially president. I've been promoting this. I was a member of the House leadership for a number of years. I promoted it through that. I got a lot of support from my colleagues in the House. There's a number of co-sponsors, a lot of support, but I can't get anywhere. I've met with Tim Geithner so many times I don't want to tell you about it. I've called for Donovan's resignation. The housing secretary doesn't seem to care about housing. He just allows people to continue to get foreclosed upon. I'm really seriously frustrated. I talked to the president directly about it. Invited him to come to my district. He committed he would.
Let me ask one more question in that regard, Congressman, because what do you think is the logic here? I mean, you're a Democrat, they're Democrats, they're supposed to be progressive. I mean, Obama's on the campaign trail talking about the middle class here. What's the logic in doing only $2.6 billion in the HAMP program, which is supposed to help homeowners, and giving $7.7 trillion through the Fed to the bankers? What are they thinking?
For the life of me, I can't figure it out. They're wondering why people aren't with them as much as they should be for the programs they put forward. 70 million Americans could be impacted. 35 million mortgages by Freddie and Fannie that the government owns that we're at risk of losing, that many of which are underwater. Huge percentages that I think it's 25% of Americans are now underwater because of the downturn. and you allow them to get a little bit of break on their mortgage, you try and restructure, and it's great politics and great policy. I don't get it, but I'll tell you what I've heard, and that is a lobbyist stopped me in the hallway one day and said, "Congressman, we hate your bill." He says, "We've done the business model, the calculation, and we can lose 10% of the houses in America, lose 10% of our portfolio, but we make more money that way than if we allow people to pay less to us each month in their interest rate."
Bingo.
So they've done a business calculation, and we're supposed to go along with it. It doesn't make sense
Well,
from the American people's perspective.
Here's the only way that it makes sense. As one bank executive told a paper, Tim Geithner is, quote, "our man in Washington." That's how it makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for the American people. Congressman
He
Cardoso.
certainly protected them.
Yes, you're saying he protected them?
He certainly protected them, and seems to every single day.
That's how it seems to all of us, unfortunately. Congressman Cardoso, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Really